Okay, so before we begin, can I have a show of hands? Who here is feeling nervous right now? Okay, so if you guys look around, being nervous or stressed is something very common in today's society. And I can take a pretty good guess as to why some of you may feel stressed. So stress can come about due to a fear to attain success. So these stresses can come from things such as familial stress, financial stress, and further, a stress of competition to come out on top in your respective fields. So such stresses can lead to one of two outcomes. On one extreme, you have a fear of failure, in which you kind of back out from taking on new challenges, and you just kind of stay passive. Or on the other extreme, something relatable to me personally, is you become a workaholic. So in essence, you become addicted to taking on new challenges. So that first initial taste of success is something you hunger for, and you keep on taking more and more and more. And this could lead to burnout, which is pretty much biting off more than you can chew. So burnout has detrimental effects on our lives. First, you can have a decreased motivation and less efficiency in the tasks you once enjoyed. Further, there could be social isolation, in effect breaking down your social networks and your support systems. And there's a slew of physiological effects, including anxiety, fatigue, gastrointestinal issues, and decreased immunity. So it's important to note that burnout is very common, and not one of us is immune to it. So each one of us can be burnt out if we take on more than we can afford to take on. So we'll take the case study of Elon Musk. He's the CEO of Tesla, a very talented person, and he's very busy, right? So he takes on so many new challenges. However, although he has not burnt out yet, he very well may be on the path to burning out. So we'll take this case study to kind of understand the mechanisms of burning out and workaholism, and explore some potential solutions that you all may use in your lives to avoid such disastrous effects. So it's important to know that workaholism is neurologically founded. Our brains have lobes, and each lobe has its own functions. So the neurons in each of these lobes communicate with one another using chemicals called neurotransmitters. So a couple of feel-good neurotransmitters include endorphins, which are released during physical exertion. There is oxytocin, which is the love hormone, and this is released during social bonding. Further, there's serotonin, which helps regulate mood, sleep, and hunger. And lastly, there's dopamine. What's important with dopamine is that it doesn't cause the feel-good sensation itself. However, it's associated with the tasks you completed that allow for such positive outcomes. So in effect, it allows for the contingencies and kind of becomes like a drug that you want more and more of, right? So you need to take on more tasks to achieve that same level of effect from the dopamine. So now you can also think of dopamine kind of like a supervisor. So if you use the analogy of our brains being a busy office, which with each of the lobes representing their own departments with their own specific functions, you could think of dopamine like a supervisor whose presence increases the function of such departments. So this doesn't necessarily mean a good thing. So a study explored the differences between brains of workaholics and that of slackers. And you could see that in the workaholic's brain, there's increased dopamine in the striatum and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. These regions are associated with reward and motivation. So in this case, the increased dopamine leads to increased motivation and reward sensations. And this is something positive, and it drives you to take on more and more and more. However, with the slacker's brains, there's increased dopamine in the anterior insula. Now, this region is associated with risk perception and emotions. So in effect, the dopamine in this area will cause you to be more risk aversive and less likely to take on new challenges or risks. So what's important to note now that we've understood the neurological foundation of workaholism is that your day only has 24 hours, right? Although you can hypothetically keep on piling up more work, you have to prioritize self-care. So within your 24-hour day, not only do you have to balance work, but you have to balance proper sleep, exercise, meditation and mental well-being, and socializing and proper nutrition. So you may ask, how could I do this? So we'll take one of Elon's busiest work schedule days as an example. So you could see here the red items represent tasks or appointments that he cannot miss or cannot reschedule. And the blue tasks represent other things that must be done during his workday. So using a calendar or even an app on your phone such as Google Calendar, this will help you visualize what time you have available to do the blue tasks. Next, you have to allot a certain amount of time that you think you can realistically take to complete the blue tasks. And all you have to do is simply find out where they fit. So for instance, lunch can fit right after the investment meeting. The workshop can fit in right after the work meeting. And lastly, he can invent new technology through a brainstorming session from 4 to 6. Now, after this, after 6 o'clock, he is free to live his own life and prioritize self-care, as the slide we mentioned earlier. So this will lead to an avoidance of burnout and ultimately a happy Elon. So what's important to know through this talk, taking more of a positive turn, is although workaholism is very much like an addiction, burnout does not have to be the end game. You can still be successful, but by properly managing your time, you can be happy and healthy. Thank you.